Hi, I'm Dineth Hettiaracchi, the debate coach of Wesley College and the debate coach of Sri Lanka Law College. Today, we are going to be debating a motion that was held at the recently concluded APIIT Inter-School Debating Championship. The motion is as follows. This house believes that the targeting of human shields in war should be legal. There's a small Infoslide. A human shield is a civilian or group of civilians who are forced to shield a legitimate military target in order to prevent the enemy from attacking it. Okay, so first of all, to give you an example of what human shields might look like, this can range from enemies. If you want to cross a bridge, perhaps you make sure that there are civilians walking on either side of you on the bridge in order to make sure that enemies can't shoot at you without injuring the civilians. This can also be something like you housing civilians near your military bases so that you are free, you're safe, or rather not safe per se, but that enemy combatants can't use air attacks or any sort of explosive devices on your military base without also harming the civilians around the area as well. This is a strategy that has been used in the past a lot, and I think, to be honest, it's being used even nowadays. So then, on proposition, to win this debate, what would you need to do? You would ideally need to prove why this is something that is uniquely important, why if there's either this is hindering the war effort to such an extent that this is creating untold harm, or rather this is beneficial in some other way, some perhaps with the benefit that this you can get in no other way. The only way that you can solve this problem is by allowing people to target human shields. I think the ideas on prop, you can summarize most of them, I think, like into these two main ideas. You have this, you would have to debate on this principle, I think this utilitarianistic principle, and also you can talk about maybe another argument on the kind of harms and benefits, the benefits that you're going to get in doing so, or rather the harms that you're going to get by not doing so. So we'll first look at the principle. So utilitarianism, the principle is where you say we have to sacrifice the few to save the many. I think it's been used overall in many places. How do we apply it specifically to this motion? So what you want to do is you want to say that war is something that is inherently bad. It takes away lots of human life. So whenever two countries go to war, you always have people who are caught in the fire. Soldiers on both sides end up dying. And you say that this kind of human life, the loss of human life, is something that is extremely tragic. The more that war goes on, the more likely it is that more and more people are going to die. And in that sense, your primary goal should be to, one, not have a war. But of course, not having a war is quite difficult because people go to war when you most of the time exhausted plenty of other options. There are, to extent, certain deterrents in place to prevent people from going to war, or to make it less to de-incentivize people from going to war. So assuming that that's out of the question, now that you have gone to war, so what you want to do then is you want to end the war as quickly as possible in order to minimize the amount of damage. I think in a debate you can explain what this would look like in terms of damage. So generally it could be a loss of human life, obviously, from soldiers and all of that, but also in terms of how it affects the country economic wise, the amount of funds that you have to put into the war effort, in terms of societal damage, what happens when you have like entire communities of men who are getting maybe either signing off war, who are drafting, who actually end up dying. You can talk about the impacts on like mental impacts, how people feel generally, the feeling of security that you have in society. All of these things are gone. I think it's enough to explain how war is harmful. So what you want to do is you want to take all those harms and you say that the more the war goes on and on, the far more likely it is that these harms will be magnified tenfold, and you want to do something in order to stop this. Now, why is it that this is the only way that you can go ahead with this? Why is there like specifically no other way? Because the opposition can prove that there's some other way that you can do this, that you can still win the war or end the war, then it'll be easier for them to win. So what you can then do is you characterize what the war effort looks like. So you say that in situations where there are strong, maybe perhaps resistance, in situations, let's say some, I think this is some practical aspects I can probably talk about in the other argument as well. But for now, I'll talk about this over there. But I think generally you can say that it's very difficult to carry out attacks properly. So let's one example would be that you find this military base on terrorists, but you can't attack because they have housed civilians nearby. The only alternative that you would probably have is to issue a warning first. But by the time that you issue the warning, of course, the terrorists are going to just pack up, or this doesn't even need to be terrorists, but like the enemy is going to just pack up everything and just leave, and you're going to simply not going to be effective. So that's just an example of what why it makes it difficult to carry on this warfare. So you say that it is in the best interest of the country and like of everybody involved in order to do so. So that's on a principle level. You like weigh and you say that look, you have to make the trade-off that look, we will lose some lives, some people will die in terms of human shields, but overall, the more the war goes on, more people will die from both sides, and that is something that is comparable. And we think that this is the best course of action to take. If you want, you can draw parallels to other situations as well, where you prioritize some people. Even if it comes to like in medicine, you do this prioritizing when you triage. In extreme situations, you also always try to prioritize as many people. But I think there's also another interesting parallel you can probably draw regarding to war itself. You can talk about conscription. So even within conscription, what happens is you might have noticed in the Ukraine war, what's happening right now is they don't have enough people who are fighting in the army, at least because the people who were brave, who volunteered early on, they went and they died, and now the people who are left are mostly people who didn't want to go to war. So these people are now being forcefully drafted into war. Men aren't allowed to like leave the country and all of that. So you say that look, even at some point in time, you take away individuals' choice, people within your own country, and you put them into the war effort, knowing that yes, they will die, you risk their life as well. And perhaps there's an absence of certainty of death, but to a large extent, you could argue, I think, you're taking away their choice and putting them into extreme life-threatening situations. So that's, I think, a good enough parallel to say that, look, you're willing to risk the life of some people in order for the greater good. The greater good being like the life of their families, long-term well-being of the country, all of that. So you say that this is the parallel that we make, and given that we also countries have to make this kind of sacrifices of their own life, of the lives of their own citizens, I think it's still justified in order to do so with enemy combatants as well. So there's of course there's a chance that these human shields can still be like of your own citizens, but even so the parallel still stands. You are willing to risk life of people for the greater good, and that is something that you can still do in terms of human shields. Okay, so that's about the principal part. I think then moving on to this practical aspect of what this would look like. So like I said earlier, we're talking about how this makes it difficult. So one, you want to ideally mechanize the difficulties that you're going to face, because opposition is going to try to poke holes in your case and say, no, you can do this and other plenty of the alternatives. So you want to try to say, portray exact scenarios, at least to give the judge an idea, to make them side more with you. So the example I gave you earlier, I think works to an extent. So you say that, look, in terms of urgency, you can't necessarily do this when you have to like give warnings beforehand, when you have to like tell them like, look, we have to attack this place. But because at that point these people will pack up, leave, and it'll give them like more time. It's more time means they have more time to like recuperate, they have more time to like get aid from other maybe like the supply lines or whatever. And this again means they have more time to strike back, I think, even harder. Another thing that you can say is that, look, some places it is like almost impossible to penetrate when you are like carrying out a tactical effort. Perhaps you could, let's assume that you want to do an airstrike, because you usually do airstrikes if they are like powerful weapons that you want to destroy, things that can be like really harmful to your cause. But in the event that you do so, so even that you aren't allowed to do so, then like the alternative is going to be something that is where you have to send in individuals into like the war zone, into the depth of it, where they are highly likely to die, because you aren't now allowed to use air attacks which are indiscriminately going to end up killing civilians. So you say like, look how much more difficult it is in order to like send these people in, how it will hamper the war effort. You're going to have even more losses on your side because you aren't able to carry out the operation in that specific way. you can, I think, just talk about how even like when you go into villages, how these people might be end up using human shields, uh, how you aren't allowed to shoot because now you're worried about like fear of prosecution, how that might end up hurting like your own unit sometimes when you want, when there's inactivity, you might, or rather you not inactivity, the inability to act, then sometimes that might end up hurting your own unit because those people are having even more time to get together and like attack you. So I think there's this other practical aspect to this. You can talk about the deterrence that you instill in these kind of people. So one, you can say that look, human shields are something that you don't, that's something that people, perhaps you could characterize as last resort, but even if it is not, you could say that it takes a certain amount of energy on the enemy combatant side to maintain human shields, because they have to like move them along. Sometimes it might affect their discreteness, all of that. So you say that look, now once you actually end up not taking into consideration that they have human shields and you still attack them anyway, those people are going to be less incentivized to carry on human shields because they know that it's not effective. It's the same logic that you use in so you might have seen other motions where you where you ban paying ransoms, and in situations where the US doesn't negotiate with terrorists, they have like different sort of stances. So the entire idea is that look, even though it might create harm, you do so because you don't want people to take advantage of that fact. So if you sometimes if you do decide to negotiate with terrorists, perhaps then what happens is they will try to take things so that they will try to gain positions of power to be able to negotiate with you, and you don't want that to happen. So similarly, I think you can apply it here. If you don't care about human shields, then people are less likely to have human shields around because they know they will end up probably getting shot either way. So that's also like another practical aspect you could probably look at inside of prop. If you are looking at opposition's case, I think opposition's case you have to perhaps go a bit in depth. So the way that you want to characterize this is you want to say that look, prop is taking the easy way out when they decide to attack human shields, and that war is not something that should be easy. I'll explain this a bit later on. So first, I think most importantly, you talk about what happens in the absence of this kind of law. What happens when you are allowed to target human shields? Sure, in a perfect world, perhaps individuals will only like have the minimum amount of collateral that is completely unavoidable situations where there's no other way to get through. They will attack human shields. But what's most likely to happen is these individuals are now in the armies are going to attack people indiscriminately. If you don't want to go to that extreme of like maybe indiscriminately, you can say like the care that they have towards human civilians or ensuring that they get hurt is far less, because now you can simply frame them as look, they were being used as human shields, and it's easier to absolve yourself of accountability in that sense. I think because it's simply difficult to draw a line. So you say that like look, the amount of accountability is going to be far lower. That's something I think we can easily expand on why it is bad. You can talk about human life and how it's valuable and how this is something that's being all these laws they were put in place, IHL, in order to protect them, and that is simply not something that is going to happen now. Even within, I think you can probably stress that look, even when war exists, people recognize it is sound as unavoidable, but you still put these regulations in place to make sure that there, at least even within war, human life is not degraded or taken lost to an unnecessary extent. That's why you don't allow things weapons like flamethrowers, all of that, because there's unnecessary suffering. That's why you don't allow like weapons of mass destruction, rather indiscriminately bombing, because you want to minimize the amount of casualties within war, and you can say that is simply not going to happen in this kind of situation. And not only is it's not going to be the best case scenario, but it's definitely probably going to be like the worst case scenario where people are harmed on a far larger scale than they at least have to, or at least the minimum. So that's in terms of, I think, like soldiers not needing to care in terms of their attacks. But I think also governments, perhaps then you move on like higher up, you talk about like governments, military generals, people who actually strategize, they come up with plans. So then you say like how individuals are more prone to now taking the easy way out in terms of coming up with strategies. So instead of coming up with a plan where you identify, when you do a couple of recon missions, you analyze data, you figure out what terrorists are like, where these enemies are hiding, where you try to put in the effort in order to figure out where to attack, what are their weaknesses, all of that. You like indiscriminately authorize some, maybe like sweeping like bombing of like the entire area. Then you can simply not in I would say not in the war, but like this, you can wipe out the enemy combatants easily. So that's something that this IHL is something that's going to factor in a lot when you make this kind of decisions. And now, in the absence of this, these people have no incentive again on this like bureaucratic level to pay attention to any of them. But also, this can lead to, I think, a bit of a slippery slope about how what perhaps I think you can also badger prop with like POIs. To what extent, like would you be okay with killing let's say an entire village to take out one terrorist who was hiding within the village? Because technically that person is you could, I think on op you can argue that the difference is same. This person was using humans to hide himself within the village, and then to like conduct malicious activities within that. So you can ask those stuff to like see how prop responds. But also coming back to this idea on how like war should not be easy. So the main idea behind this is that if war is easy, people would opt into it. So that is why you don't want people to go for it. You want war to be as difficult as possible. You don't want it to be like unnecessary, a whole lot of trouble for governments to actually opt into this, because they have to like follow all of this. If like declaring war was something that is quite easy, as some like simply carpet bombing some sort of like some area, then people are more prone to be doing this. So you can also talk about how it is not something that should be allowed under any circumstance. There's also, I think, this principle response on how morality, on how this is immoral, about how these are individuals. Like you can make a distinction with soldiers and civilians, where soldiers, like most of them at least, they voluntarily make a choice in order to like come to war, and they attack each other to extent. But however, human shields, these civilians, I think like more often than not, they are forced to be there. They don't really have a choice. They're not allowed to like move out. So it's unjustified to like harm these individuals. They never had a choice in the matter. They are like victims of this circumstance, and how it's not something that you should be doing anyway. There's also this other idea that you could probably run, not as strong, but this idea on how you might actually like feed into propaganda on how so let's say if it's like versus a terrorist organization or something, how when those individuals are now able to like use this against you, they say, look, these individuals, this army, they are slaughtering slaughtering innocent people, they are killing them, they don't care about you. And I think like you just then analyze this and to say how this will get either infuriate these individuals, get them to like be more in support of this kind of groups, this perhaps terrorist groups, how they're going to like alienate them, and they radicalize them even maybe a bit more, and get people to join them, become martyrs. Like this probably a line there as well, that if you want to talk about how that would look like. So I think those are probably the main ideas that you can talk about in opposition. I think you'll probably want to poke holes in the case, especially regarding other alternatives that you want to do. I think strategically speaking, it's best if you can, in this motion, if you can give like a lot of other alternatives and say, mechanize them, say these are all the different things that you actually could do. So it could even lead to things, simply negotiation techniques. So how you're less likely to even negotiate, because you negotiate in situations where sometimes it's very difficult to make progress. And you can say these are situations where like if these laws existed, then these people would not be doing this, because so on prop they say, look, it's difficult to progress now, you can't do anything else, so let's carpet bomb these people. But on op you can say, look, these are the kind of circumstances that actually lead to some sort of like negotiations, when there's like absolutely no progress to be made, and the other side is also like understanding there's no progress that you can make. The solution is not to revert to like attacking human shields and all of that, but then to like negotiate and come up with something, perhaps something peaceful. Maybe down the line you can like talk about how this might perhaps promote more reconciliation, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. If you like build up everything else, that is something that can potentially be explored. Yeah, so thank you for listening. Like and subscribe the video.